Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 5th of May, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have with me in the studio Diane Rasmussen, McAdie. Hello, Diane.
Hi, Brian.
And Ben Rubin will be joining us from Studio 2, so a little bit of a change around today, but welcome to UK Column News. And of course, today is the bank holiday, so thank you very much for joining us today. Well, we've got a lot to report, but we're going to start off with recognising the good work of the Reform Party. So let's just have a look at Reform's website. And of course, this is the key thing: become a member, join the UK's fastest growing political movement. And we just ask a question because is Farage pictured here with arms raised? Is he going to be the saviour? Well, first of all, I want to say thank you very much to all the people that got out, who worked, and of course to take some 677 seats. That was a very good effort by the Reform Party, so credit where it's due. We have some questions to ask, and some of those questions may possibly ruffle some feathers, but we think this absolutely has to be done if the real issues taking place in UK are going to be dealt with. So let's just have a look at what's been reported in the press. So the Telegraph here: Tory council swept away by Reform surge. So a pretty powerful headline there. I'm going to say to the audience, does this represent opportunities? Does it represent threats? And I think there's a little bit of both, which we'll get into. But here was a bit from the Times. John Curtis: Reform's by-election win outstrips anything UKIP achieved. And I want to put a little caveat on that, because John Curtis talks about Farage being a political disruptor. And of course, he's talking in terms of Farage's activity amongst the bigger established parties, the Conservatives and Labour. But we also need to remember that Farage has disrupted his own party in the past, and he also abandoned it, what many UKIP people at the time thought was a critical point. So I'm going to remind the audience that I had an interview with Joe West a little while ago. He'd resigned from Reform UK. And in the dialogue, we had a very interesting chat about my experiences in UKIP going back quite a few years, and his experiences coming up to 2025 in Reform UK. Now, you can find that interview on the UK Column website: Nigel Farage and the destructive Toryisation of Reform UK. But the key part of the discussion was this: we saw similarities between what happened with Farage in UKIP and what was happening in Reform in 2025. So we've got rousing speeches, we've got authoritarian control, where Farage is protected by a circle of appointees. We've got suppression of successful initiatives by party activists, and the end result is a party led into a cul-de-sac and ultimately a failure to achieve the political success its members are desperate to achieve. Now, I'm going to stress very strongly here that I recognise the immense good work of the Reform soldiers who got out, did the work, did the canvassing to get elected. They deserve the recognition for the really outstanding results they've achieved. I'm gently putting out a little bit of a warning that we saw exactly that situation with UKIP many years ago. And then what happened was that the leadership of the party failed to follow up on the success of the people who'd walked the streets and convinced voters to vote for them. So just think about that, and I'll be coming back onto this subject in just a moment. But the other thing that we've got happening in UK at the moment is a mixture of history and propaganda. And I picked up here from the Ministry of Defence Twitter, their X site. It says the cenotaph stands draped in flags, just as it did on VE Day 1945. Today we pay tribute to the greatest generation whose courage secured the freedom and prosperity our armed forces protect today. Well, if we add a bit, there was another tweet, and it calmly announced that armed forces of Ukraine would be joining this VE Day parade. Now, a number of the UK column audience contacted me because they were the individuals were actually very, very upset about this because, of course, if we know our history, the overwhelming effort of Ukraine was to support the Nazis, and yet here they are to join our parade as if none of these things had taken place. But if the Ukrainians are one issue, then what happened was the Ministry of Defence went on to promote this lady, and no disrespect to her, Henny Frank's a Jewish refugee. She escaped from the Nazis, came to UK, worked as an army lorry driver, but she is given recognition. The Ukrainians are given recognition. It's almost as if the indigenous people of UK wiped off the Ministry of Defence map. Now, why should this be happening? This is where we need to get deeper into politics than I've seen Nigel Farage go in many years. And let's focus on the change agent that is Keir Starmer. And my suggestion to the audience today is that he is at his work destroying UK from inside. He claims to be securing Britain's future, but let's have a look at what's been happening. Well, of course, the first thing is this extraordinary 100-year pact with Ukraine, not voted on in Parliament, simply announced. Certainly to the public as a fait accompli. We have no idea what the background is of the Ukrainian politicians who've been drawn into this. Are they extreme right wing? We have no way of knowing. And alongside this, of course, we've got, admittedly started by the Conservatives, but we've got a memorandum of understanding drawing the UK and Israel closer together. And this is not only for trade and industry, of course, it's for intelligence services and the military. Again, the UK public simply not consulted in what was taking place. And now we see the final betrayal from Keir Starmer in particular, because as UK column has warned over many years, Brexit would be done without the exit. We would never fully leave the European Union. And we say today, we told you so, as now we get the mainstream media reports that Starmer is betraying UK by his backdoor deals with the EU, and that also includes this military grouping up. But of course, we shouldn't be surprised because Keir Starmer calmly announced to the BBC that between Westminster and Davos, he would choose Davos every time. And let's bring in over here the fact that Starmer has said that he's Prime Minister to achieve change in the UK. And our challenge to Nigel Farage is, when will you start talking about the real danger of Keir Starmer's subversive change to UK? So let's just bring this down. Will reform actually grip these real issues? We will wait to see. But of course, the Labour Party itself has stressed that it's there to change the UK. It doesn't want to tell us how, but it's constantly saying change and more change. And constant change is revolution. We're going to ask again, will reform grip these issues and talk about them in the frank way that UK column is doing so? And also, we want to know whether reform is going to grip the issue of people who are connected with the Fabians. And of course, Tony Blair as a Fabian master, that's my term, and Keir Starmer as the mere student are areas that, of course, we have many questions as to what is the power of this Fabian organisation and what are the changes that it wants for UK. Well, we can see as we look at the headlines today that immigration and migration absolutely to the fore. But as UK column has warned and warned, this immigration is not the tiny numbers coming in rubber boats. It is the thousands, some 600,000 Ukrainians last year alone, who are invited into the country by the government. They don't fight their way ashore. So these are people being invited into the country by our political masters, and the propaganda around relatively tiny numbers coming in the boats is simply the sideshow. So our challenge to Nigel Farage is, again, will reform really grip these issues of migration and what the true figures are and which political individuals are driving it. Now, if we have a look at the headlines of the paper, I've just decided to choose a couple here. We're going to say, what will reform do in the media propaganda pond? So if you have a look at the Times, it's almost difficult to see their report on reform, but of course Times is attacking the Reform Party, fight off reform with higher taxes and spending, the Prime Minister is told. We've then got a big headline: EU blocks efforts to curb the flow of migrants. Now remember, they're talking about rubber boats, they're not talking about the true statistics on massive migration of people invited into the country. And if I just bring the Telegraph up here, of course, we've got a mixture of fear, imminent suspected Iran terror raid foiled. Of course, we have absolutely no evidence to support that headline, but this is put in juxtaposition with the Beckhams. What relevance they have to UK, I've absolutely no idea. And then if you look at the very bottom of that article on the right, it says that Facebook is putting children's lives in danger, says security chiefs. And again, we're going to ask the key question: will reform grip these issues and talk about them properly? On that note, Ben, I think we'll bring you in. And of course, you've been warning for some considerable time about the powers of these non-government organisations that are clearly grooming and training our politicians to what we can only describe as the rules-based international system. What have you got for us today?
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Diane. Hello, everybody. Like Plymouth Argyle losing to Leeds, I have been relegated today to Studio 2 by an ascendant Northern champion in the shape of Diane Rasmussen McAdie. So congratulations, Diane, for taking the top spot in the studio today. I should also just say that's the last time I will ever do a football reference, by the way. So just putting it out there. And I'll also just like to say that was a fascinating opening segment, Brian. And I think what's particularly interesting is that we now no longer have a Conservative Party in this country, and reform is really just another way of saying change, isn't it? Anyway, moving on, let's kick off with my favourite quote from Orwell. Power is in tearing human minds to pieces and putting them together again in shapes of your own choosing. We're going to talk about nudging and actually what happens beyond nudging. I'm going to introduce you to this organisation, which is the Behavioural Public Policy a journal. This is an online journal, an academic journal hosted by Cambridge University, and it is edited by, amongst others, this gentleman, that is Professor Cass R. Sunstein from Harvard, who essentially invented nudging, the behavioural and insights techniques that are used on an increasing basis to coerce unsuspecting civilian populations into doing things that they wouldn't normally do. That's how the stuff is being deployed across the whole system. And actually, we, as I said in the intro, we're going beyond nudging now, right? So the BPP issued this report on the 15th of April, and a bunch of people who you really don't want to have these kinds of tools in their possession are getting extremely excited now about the idea that we're moving from nudging to boosting. So empowering behaviour change to address global challenges. This is the shiny new toy that these people have got their hands on. Let's dig into what that actually means. Let's have a little look at the report. This is from the abstract in the intro. You should go read this. It's only about 10 pages. It's worthwhile understanding what's going on here. I'll just summarize some stuff. But essentially, the COVID-19 pandemic provided a stark reminder that societies will struggle to address global challenges unless they are able to change behavior at scale. Yeah, societies need to change behavior at scale. The widely adopted nudge approach epitomizes an individualistic deficit model of human cognition and motivation that leverages or overcomes people's weaknesses and biases to get them to do things they would otherwise not. And this is about nudging people into new types of behaviors. And what the team behind this are saying is that, by contrast, we argue that tackling the challenges facing humanity requires a collective capacity building approach, one that boosts the competencies, opportunities, and motivations of individuals to act together. Right? We're going beyond nudging, and we're going to reshape humanity ultimately towards collective action in order to address what they describe as global challenges, right? And very importantly, they're really reinforcing at the outset that the COVID-19 pandemic was one of those global challenges and a good example of how nudge was used in a responsible way. And that's not really surprising when you look at who wrote the report, because two of the four authors are here. This is Robert West from UCL, Susan Minchy now from UCL, both from the Behaviour Change, the Centre for Behaviour Change at UCL. Names that will be familiar to UK column viewers, because both of these individuals, Susan Minchy in particular, was intimately involved in advising the UK government through the COVID scenario as members of SAGE and SPI-B, and ramping up the terror in the population in order to coerce people into doing things that they wouldn't normally do, right? And actually, some might call that terrorism. And if we allow the official narrative to lapse, and it turns out that that was actually a terror campaign, then those two individuals in particular might be in quite a bit of trouble. So obviously, we have to maintain the COVID narrative. Let's go back to the report. The deficit model, that's nudging, exemplified by nudging, urgently needs to be replaced by an approach that can achieve the global behavior changes needed to cope with the multiple crises that humanity is currently facing. The things we all do drive pandemics, for example, travel or meat-rich diets, and therefore the next potentially more lethal pandemic could be emerging as we write this. I think there might be some nudging laid into that. That's a very immediate and slightly terrifying term for them to be using, that a pandemic could be emerging as we write this. The climate emergency is already claiming countless lives, apparently. I don't think that's demonstrably true in any sense whatsoever. And it's certainly damaging economies, but not for the reasons that these people are putting forth. They conclude by saying what is needed are wholesale, sustained and evidence-based efforts to capitalize on and develop collective human agency. Yeah, this is about reframing and re-engineering humanity, populations of countries, getting stuck into the education system, going after young children, right? You know, remodeling the family. Actually, if we look at some of the global challenges that they describe and the interventions that they want to make, there's two initial interesting ones here. So how do we help people to reclaim their self-control in online environments? And that apparently requires the introduction of something called a citizen choice architect. And so these are the types of roles, the types of work that's happening inside government, inside big corporations in order to influence behavior, to get you to comply more effectively, a citizen choice architect. And then the next global challenge, how to combat overweight and obesity. It's probably a typo, especially in children and adolescents. And that's about increasing parental competence to design the family meal environment. Yeah. So that's just cooking good food for your kids. Apparently, Cambridge University and the government need to be down in the weeds advising you on that kind of thing. And then I'll save the best for last. And this one actually really took my breath away, although I suppose it's not that unsurprising when you understand where it's come from. I'll read this whole thing out. The global challenge, how to empower citizens to cope with the infodemic, the tsunami of misinformation online and social media and on instant messaging services. So the competence here is to reliably assess the trustworthiness of online information sources. And the boost intervention that they're suggesting, get this, right? Training people to use the methods of professional fact checkers, i.e., using a search engine to see what others say about the source of the content, what they call lateral reading, rather than critically thinking through the content itself, which is called vertical reading. And that's been shown to be effective in assessing the credibility of websites. School-based interventions with instructional strategies like teacher modeling and guided practice can be used to teach lateral reading. Pop-up graphics can be used to prompt social media users to read laterally. Cambridge University, Cass Sunstein, the author of this report, are saying that citizens should be trained to not critically think through content that they find online, and that they should be searching for official, sanctioned, narrative reinforcing titles, whether that's from the government or from elsewhere in the media, in order to correct them and keep them on course. Right? They are being completely explicit about what they're doing and what their plans are. And what we've seen over the past few years, based on this report and the change of language from just a nudge to a boost, I think we're going to see this stuff really ramp up over the coming months.
Ben, thank you very much for that. And I totally agree. This is going to accelerate very quickly as they get more desperate. Something I just like to emphasize for people is the language that they're using. We need to understand it. We need to spend time reading in detail what these individuals are saying, because at the end of the day, they are unfolding their policy on the back of this language. If you understand the language, you understand not only the policies that they are enacting, but you can also then understand how to dismantle these policies. So I'd say to our audience, please don't dismiss the language of these individuals as nonsense. It is nonsense in one way, but we have to look at it. They are using this in order to create the policies. Now, how are we going to deal with this attack on our minds? Well, Diane, you've been away with some other people, and that's always a good start.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Hello, Ben. It's really great to be in the studio today. I'm actually down here because over the weekend I attended and spoke at a conference that we talked about last Monday on the news, chaired by Kathy Mudge of Protect and Teach. And as I've done an interview with her previously, and she's been on the news last week talking about the conference. So on Saturday, I went to their annual conference and had a wonderful time. I just have a few photos I'd like to show you here from the things I took, random things I took at the conference, showing kind of the spirit of the people that were here. Here's somebody's tote bag saying, "Help, she's thinking thoughts I don't like, arrest her." And these were some stones that were passed out that a lady is making for free. She encouraged us to take as many as possible and leave them around in places. One says, "Trans ideology is a belief. It is not fact. No hate, just truth. And stop, quote, gender-affirming butchery." Here's some coasters that were made, that were handed out. Woman, a female of any age, 2025, hashtag Year of the Woman. This is, of course, because of the Supreme Court ruling. And, of course, as we know, a woman is an adult human female. Somebody's T-shirt said, safeguarding is our duty, biology, not ideology. And I also picked up a copy of the Women's Quiz Book. This is written by a woman in the 1990s called Jennifer Gorley, who is a member of the Protect and Teach group. And what we're going to do is, if you are a member of Wallace on Extra, we will talk about this book some more in Extra. We might even have a quiz, Brian.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
So some of the content that was covered in the conference, this is an important report from Protect and Teach called Safeguarding of Children in School and College. You can download this from their website. It's a very important report that shows a lot of the research that they have done in terms of contacting the Church of England and other people who are in charge of what's happening in the schools and the colleges, and trying to call them out for it and trying to make people realize the biological reality of having only two sexes. This is Professor Gloria Moss. Some of you will recognize her name. She wrote the article that came out recently on UK Column about the Fabians and the Fabians founding of the Labour Party. Again, it's a very important report. So she was one of the invited speakers, and I was the other invited speaker. She talked about the relationship between transgender and and transhumanism, and again brought in some of her work on the Fabians. She did a wonderful speech as well about all of the academic research that she's done in the past that shows the reality of the differences between men and women and their preferences for design. These are the two wonderful ladies that kind of head up the group. Kathy Mudge, you'll know, we saw her last week on the news, and that's the other member of the committee over there on the right. And they kind of gave an overall introduction to the conference. One of the things that has been covered in Kathy's interview that I did with her a few weeks ago is the Church of England's guidance called Flourishing for All, Anti-Bullying Guidance for Church of England Schools. And one of the things that we showed in this interview was an appendix from that document that showed a glossary of terms showing that the Church of England has in fact adopted gender ideology with terms like gender dysphoria, identity disorder, gender recognition certificate, M2F, which is male or female, packing, which is making people look like they are something that they are not, underneath their clothing, transgender, transitioning, binding, which is what girls do when they don't want to develop their breasts, and so on. So one of the things after this came out was that the Church of England was contacted by Protect and Teach, and they had been contacted previously, and they said, please, because of the Supreme Court judgment, what we would like to request is that you adapt this document to show that there is only two sexes and that one sex cannot be participating in things that are meant for the other sex. And so they were quite successful in a way. It wasn't entirely amended, but they did amend this Flourishing for All documentation to show that, in fact, what we are now doing is showing that there is only two sexes, and there's some more work to do in it, but that was one thing. So now the document has been amended as of April 2025. Something else that Kathy presented was some, I guess we could say some presentations that have been developed by a group called Jigsaw. And Jigsaw is one of the organizations that now provides curriculum to students in England schools. This was leaked on the internet by a concerned adult that had been tamed otherwise. So basically, these are not normally shared with parents, but we did get access to some of these. And I'm just going to show a few examples of what the children are shown in schools when they're doing this PSHE education, which is the personal sexual health education. So just to show a couple of slides from this. And these are things that are read out directly to the students that are given to the teachers. The teachers have no choice in what's shared in this curriculum. So this one says, when we are born, we have a particular set of private body parts, genitals, reproductive organs, and these mean we are said to be male or female. This is the biological sex that is recorded on our birth certificate. Most people are born with either a male body or a female body. This is known as your biological sex. We usually call someone born with male genitals, which include a penis and testicles, a boy, and someone born with female genitals, which includes a vulva, vagina, and womb, a girl. The way a person feels about themselves, which of course is obviously different, and whether they feel like they are male, a boy, or female, a girl, is known as their gender identity. And this is one of the things that is shown as part of this particular lesson. And what I would like to do is leave this on screen and read the notes that are given to the teachers that they are provided when they have to give this lesson to the children. And this is exactly what the teachers are told to do. Demonstrate how to draw a Venn diagram, which is what is shown there, where we have boys and girls as separate, and then both in the middle, which is a mix potentially of boys and girls, with one circle labeled boys, one circle labeled girls, and both in the middle, and ask children to quickly do their own on whiteboards. Ask children to sort the statements into categories by writing the numbers in the correct area of the Venn diagram in pairs if appropriate. Remind the children how to complete a Venn diagram, including how some things can be outside all the circles. I don't know how that works. Before children are invited to share their categorization, ask them if this was an easy or difficult exercise, and why do they think they have been asked to do this? And then a note to the teacher, you will be able to see how aware of gender stereotyping they are by their responses. Hopefully, children will not have ingrained gender stereotypes, and if they don't, please feel you can move swiftly through this part of the lesson. So we're trying to break apart what boys do and what girls do and break down those stereotypes. However, if you see some stereotypical ideas coming through, it is worth spending time unpacking these with the children. Do not leave stereotypical responses unchallenged. Handle the discussion carefully to draw out the concept of stereotypes. So, Brian, here what we're seeing is the breakdown of understanding what it is to be a boy and what it is to be a girl. Not to say that stereotypes are always the case, but I don't think that they want the children to leave the lesson at all whatsoever with any concept of what a boy is or what a girl is. I don't know what you think about that.
I think it's absolutely correct. And what we're seeing is the power of these outside agencies and the companies. And we're now in the situation where a school teacher is not allowed to think for themselves in preparing their own lesson plan. So couple that with a government that wants to use accelerated nudging to reframe the way adults think, we can be sure that they are desperate to get their hands on the minds of little children so that those children can be reframed before they become adults. Very, very sinister stuff, Diane. We will continue to keep reporting. And I'm going to say a huge thank you to all the people who set up that conference and, of course, who are taking the trouble to confront some of these organisations head on. This is what proper activism is about, and this is what we need if we're going to pull the foundation out from this dangerous government grooming of our children. Well, if you like what the UK column is doing, then please do support us. We need your financial support. And of course, there's many ways you can do that. You can make a donation to us. You can take out a monthly, annual, or lifetime membership. You can also buy something through the shop. And we always like to highlight that we do have Clive de Carle's health products, and we make a small percentage on those if you would like to order through UK Column. Now, the material we put out is to be shared, and although we are shadow banned on some of the platforms and completely banned on others from time to time, e.g. YouTube, information is there for people to circulate. Please do give the UK Column recognition if you are using information that's come from us. This helps us grow and expand. Now, Diane, you've been commenting on articles going up on UK Column website. There's a lot of really good material. What have we got here?
Yeah, so this is just a couple of articles that have been published in the past week. So every Monday, I'll be reviewing kind of what we've published in the past week. So here are two brand new ones to take a look at. This first one is from Vanessa Beeley, the UK private security boom in Syria under Al-Qaeda regime, part 1. So this will be a multiple part series. She reported some of this material in her spot on the news last Wednesday. And the other new one is by Matthew Arrett, The Enduring Problem of the Jesuits, which is actually a very timely article because the Pope who just passed away was a Jesuit. So it's really a very interesting historical and deep look into what the Jesuits are about and what they've been doing. Okay.
Thank you very much for that. Now, Ben, you've been out travelling, and Saturday just gone was an event in the Stowford Community Centre in Sidmouth. That was a talk on natural law, remedy or ruin. It's Our Choice by William Katie. How did you find it?
It was fantastic. I had a wonderful, wonderful couple of days over in Sidmouth. Will was excellent. He talks about the British Constitution, trial by jury, mechanisms for self-governance. See the question about there, can we be our own government? I think we can, but we've got to take responsibility for our own actions. This is what we should ultimately be aiming for. It was a real powerhouse performance, 3 hours of material, expertly delivered. And there's a great crowd there. It's really good to meet some UK Column viewers, had some lovely warm comments and feedback, and someone told me that I felt like a family member to them, which was just really lovely, actually. And it was a great venue. Sidmouth is just something else. I've never been down there before. I mean, just one of the most beautiful places. And we even got a little display from the lifeguard out on manoeuvres. They weren't actually rescuing anybody, but I think they were just letting everyone know that they were there. And yeah, a great weekend in Devon.
Okay, Ben, I'm really glad that you enjoyed it, and a huge thank you again for those people that took the effort to put on an event to start talking not only about what's wrong, but what can be done. This is what proper activism is about, and a huge thank you to all that team. Well done to yourself for going. Should I just say that the RNLI were doing that exercise there. That wasn't actually a migrant rubber boat, before anybody gets too excited. Now, the other thing we have to tell you is that tonight at 7 p.m. Germ Warfare will be speaking on why machines will never rule the world. We're very grateful to have Germ with us on the UK column, and he's going to be putting out some really interesting material. So do look out for this at 7 o'clock tonight. We've also got interesting interview coming up with Malcolm Hills under the title An Englishman Abroad. Now, Malcolm's been living in Russia, and this is an excellent opportunity for UK column viewers to understand a little bit about the realities of what it's like to live in other countries, particularly those countries that are constantly in the bad books of the United Kingdom. So do join us for that at 1 o'clock tomorrow. Now, I'm just going to move on through one slide. So let's go on through that. A reminder that Friday the 18th, the 19th of July, we've got the Thetford Truth and Freedom Beer Festival at the Angel Inn, Swallow Lane, Larling, NR 162QU. That's 18th and 19th of July. And again, this is another event, very relaxed, where socializing with people and learning and talking about what's happening in the country go together. I think this is a very powerful way of doing things. People need the enjoyment of coming together, and they need everything possible to get rid of that horrible stress and fear which the government is piling upon us with their behavioural insights and accelerated nudging. Now, we've also got the Sounds Beautiful Festival coming up. That's June the 26th to 29th in Wimborne, Dorset. And that is going to be a very good event with speakers and music and camping and a lot more. So if you can get there, please get involved. And also like to say that there's a couple of free tickets available. If you go onto the UK column Facebook, you can enter. Plus, we'll put up a link on our show notes about this. So a lot happening, and I think this is really encouraging. People are not just active in the political sense, and well done to everybody in all the parties, not only the reform candidates that got out at local level, but all the other small party people who are taking on the big parties by being active on the streets. We also want to thank people who are putting on alternative conferences and doing things in their own way at local level. This is very, very powerful. So, Diane, probably that brings us back to you. What's been happening around libraries?
Well, Brian, that was the question that Protect and Teach had for me. I've been working with them for a few months now on looking at the books that are being provided in libraries to children. And so the reason they invited me to this conference over the weekend was to talk about what's going on in libraries and how these things are getting into the hands of children. And what I want to say in advance is that basically the overall impression that I want to give to the viewers, and I hope you get this from what I show you, is that it's an entire system that revolves around the libraries. And it's not individual librarians in particular that are trying to put this in front of children. It's an entire system. And essentially, I don't believe that the librarians are really given much of a choice. And I'm going to demonstrate that through some very direct evidence that I know how to access after over 20 years in the profession. So I just want to show here, Emily Drabensky was the president of the American Library Association from 2023 to 2024. And the reason I'm going to be talking about the American Library Association is not only because I was trained under American Library Association credentials, but because there's a reciprocal relationship directly between the ALA and CILIP, which is the UK's Chartered Institute for Library and Information Professionals. And the reason that this is important is, for example, if you're trained in an ALA program, you can come to the UK and work under a program that would otherwise be accredited by CILIP and vice versa. So there are direct associations. And of course, the ALA is much larger just due to the population of America. And so a lot of what happens in CILIP happens firstly with ALA, and that includes the funding, that includes the agenda, and that includes what gets pushed through the professional body. So Emily, being president from 2023 to 2024, when this first came out, she tweeted that she couldn't believe that a so-called Marxist lesbian, as she calls herself, could be elected to be the president of the ALA. And she went on to say that she was definitely going to put her own politics into what happens in the American Library Association, therefore in the libraries, which is really not what we are really supposed to be doing at all ethically. So let's hear what Emily had to say to this conference in Chicago a couple of years ago. That was literally a conference for Marxists, and she went to go talk to them. And what did she say to them?
Hi, I'm Emily, and I'm a librarian. I just wanted to say thank you so much. I just want to say thank you for bringing up libraries and classroom libraries, but also school libraries of all kinds, public libraries and higher education libraries who've been under attack in similar ways. But I think your point that public education needs to be a site of socialist organizing, I think libraries really do too. And I haven't seen that for the people who are working in libraries, but I think there's real opportunity here to both connect what's happening in public education, what's happening in libraries, but also we need some help in the libraries, and we need to be on the agenda of socialist organizing. So I just want to get up and say that. So thank you.
I just want to thank you for your work and career to stick your neck out and then fight at a difficult time. It's an inspiration to me.
Can I just say, Diane, I reacted during that video when she said we need to focus on the agenda of socialist organizing. So there's that lady declaring that she's going to use her extreme political beliefs to get at the children by activism through the libraries. Quite incredible.
Yes, and unfortunately, it gets worse, Brian. And I'm going to show you why here. So this is John Pateman. John Pateman has written a series of books. He's worked in public libraries for over 40 years, and his books have been, there's basically a 3-part series, I think, of books about public libraries that are published by Facet Publishing, which is the publisher of SILIP. And I'm just going to read some direct quotes from these books because I can't say this any better than to come from them directly. Only the leader possesses the correct ideology and can disseminate this ideology. This, then, is the main role of the leader, to articulate, spread, and inculcate ideology. Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un, 3 exemplary leaders of the North Korean working class. It is no coincidence that the Juche Tower in Pyongyang is directly opposite the Grand People's Study House, the National Library in Revolution Square. Both represent the guiding ideology of the Korean people. Public libraries are instruments of political indoctrination. They imbue the masses with the Juche idea and maintain ideological unity in the country. And later, elsewhere in the book, he said, I was honored to share a platform with Comrade Fidel Castro at the 3rd Cuban Cultural Congress held at the Karl Marx Theater in Havana. And he is the winner of the Cuban Cultural Medal for Library Service. And he is one of the leaders in public libraries, both in the US and the UK, and is widely published by SILIP and ALA and other leading library publishers. Beth Montague Helen is a British librarian. She wrote a book that was published by Facet Publishing / SILIP in 2024 called Practical Tips for Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion in Libraries. And she said, as social justice-minded librarians, we should accept that neutrality is not possible. I was taught that we're supposed to be neutral as librarians and just provide people with what they want. Right-wing calls for censorship frequently ask that LGBTQ+ materials are removed from libraries, often in the name of protecting the children and teenagers who would most benefit from reading these books. Left-wing calls for censorship often ask that material that is racist, sexist, homophobic, or anti-trans be removed. Many reading this book may agree with this stance, meaning librarians who are supposed to be brainwashed already, finding this sort of content extremely distasteful and worrying about the effect the books may have on vulnerable members of our communities. And she goes on to say, drag queens are flamboyant performers and have frequently been integral to family entertainment, particularly in the UK, where pantomime dames are popular. Alongside the benefit of welcoming the LGBTQ+ community into the library, a drag queen story hour can be a lovely event for small children, where books are read by excellent performers. Some sections of local communities are extremely hostile to these events, however. Sandra Hughes Hassel, who is the author of Collection Management for Youth, it's another EDI book. She's an American academic in library and information science. She said library staff must pay attention to issues such as racism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, ableism, and economic inequality. They must develop strategies for addressing the inequities, not inequalities, which is very different, inequities, marginalized identity youth experience at all aspects of their library work, including collection development. But how do we do that? To ensure equitable library collections for all youth, library staff who act as collectors must adopt a structural ideology. There's that word again, the Juche idea, the Juche ideology that came from Lenin originally, according to John Pateman, perspective that recognizes the role of systems in marginalizing and oppressing marginalized identity youth. This is another book about school libraries with impact, which is another publication, another book published by Silip in the last couple of years. Just a few quotes from this. A group of parents and carers from a particular religion cannot force the library not to stock books with LGBTQ plus characters, using the argument that it is against their beliefs. The Equality Act protects the library from enforced censorship and challenges to resource provision. Ofsted state that the school environment should meet the needs of all pupils, irrespective of age, disability, gender reassignment, race, religion or belief, sex or sexual orientation. They will look at behavior and safety within a school in the context of the Equality Act. A key component of the statutory guidance for safeguarding is having an equality and diversity policy that seeks to prevent discrimination, harassment, and bullying, and details how to deal with these issues. And I'm not sure what that means for people who are Muslim or Christian or any other religion in this country. Book 28 is an LGBTIQ sort of organization. They have a small lending library in London, and they also provide guidance for librarians. I'll just summarize this quickly. And basically what they say is they give you information on how to subvert the normal ways that librarians get materials into libraries by going to other suppliers, including books for younger children, board books, picture books, middle grade books, and that we have noticed that sometimes it's improving, according to them, that the young adult titles do tend to arrive more automatically. But for children's titles, it is essential to look beyond the UK, including our list of library suppliers, which is a link on their website, and book awards for LGBTIQ, as well as the Sheffield University list challenges, which also includes children's titles. And just a couple of ways that these actually come through these vendors that provide things like book lists. They have, this is Peters, a book supplier to libraries, diverse and inclusive books for schools. They work with an organization, a charity called Inclusive Books for Children, that make up these lists that tell the librarians what they should be buying. And Book Trust is another one to take a look at, where they have, again, book lists. They say they support librarians. They curate books for librarians. Don't worry, librarians, you have lots of time because we're going to come up with the lists for you of what you need to buy. Here's an example of one of their best books from the past year, which shows all kinds of diversity present in this book. And again, this is part of the PSHE curriculum for young children. Dewey Decimal numbers that are provided by the Book 28 organization. We see 306.775 is S&M. We see 306.768 as transgender and intersex people. 79.2.028 is drag and male and female impersonation. So if you want to find those in your library, that's where you find them. And there's a list of terms called the Homosaurus, which is specifically for LGBTQ population. And one of their items as an official term that can be used to describe books in library catalogs is, in fact, transgender children. So, Brian, I think it's pretty easy to see here what they're doing. We see the ideology coming from North Korea and from Lenin and from the Soviet Union, and coming all the way down into telling librarians how they need to describe the materials in the catalogs and even tell them what books they should be buying.
And interestingly enough, that pathway comes through the so-called rules-based international order, which says effectively that it's based on Western democracy. So something very different is going. We'll talk about this a lot more in UK column extra. Ben, take us a little deeper down the rabbit hole with Innovate.
I can't believe that he referenced Kim Jong-un as an inspiration. I mean, that's just crazy, isn't it? Anyway, the global energy transition, the grand transition rumbles on. The public-private marketplace touched down in London last week for Innovation Zero World Congress. Let's see some highlights from day one.
we're here at a conference called Innovation Zero. We need all of us as a community of business leaders, but also government leaders, have the courage to stay the course. That's why this conference is so important, bringing us together.
I think we should speak openly and candidly with people about what it'll take to enable energy bills to fall whilst we do the right thing for the planet.
Making electricity cheap is so vital because 60% of our emissions reduction over the next decade is going to come from building cheap electricity.
Well, I think this event is fantastic. I mean, just the scale of it was absolutely packed.
It's vital that we have the investment in a low-carbon economy that will deliver renewable energy and the growth in the net zero economy.
Well, clean power is one of the most important things that we're doing to support the UK economy right now because it's about investment.
If we get that right, this is one of the greatest business opportunities of our lifetime.
There you have it. The greatest business opportunity of our lifetime. I'm not even going to tell you what they want, because you know what they want. They want to completely remodel the whole system, move us over to these new untested technologies that don't work and are frankly completely unnecessary. Who's delivering the message? Well, it's the usual suspects. So Sandrine Dixon de Clèves, she's a really nasty piece of work, this woman. I've listened to a lot of what she has to say. I just took this screen grab, just without trying to picture her in any particular way, but actually I think it sums her up quite nicely. She is apparently the author and executive chair of something called Earth for All, but also importantly, they missed this bit out, she's president of the Club of Rome. Right? And she was the first person in their video. So I think that tells you a lot about what the priorities are and who's ultimately calling the shots. Who else have we got in the frame? Greg Jackson, CEO of Octopus Energy, basically the selected champion of net zero. And for me, this he's a front man. You actually listen to what he's talking about. Anytime that he speaks, imagine that he's just delivering a script and that he doesn't actually understand what he's saying. And I think you'll get a real insight into what this guy's about. He's essentially a front man for global capital and in particular some of the big technology plays that are happening further up the chain inside Octopus Group. Kraken in particular, I think you need to go and have a look at. It's basically a global control system for the whole of international energy infrastructure, and he's basically just the front man to help it usher this whole thing through. Who else was there? Emma Pinchbeck, new CEO of the Climate Change Committee. I've got to say, it's remarkable she actually made it to the event. Apparently, by her own admission, she has trouble getting out of bed in the morning, and I'll just leave that there. Who else? Lord Adair Turner, the chairman of the FSA during the 2008 financial crisis. So he's actually personally responsible for all of those bankers that went to prison after the great crash in 2008. Oh, sorry, no bankers went to prison, did they? So he oversaw that. He's also a member of the G30, who was the group that oversee the Bank of International Settlements, the central bank of central bankers. And he actually describes himself as a technocrat. That's how he talks about himself and what he does. And then finally, this little squeaker, this is Chris Stark, who's a head of mission for clean power, another unelected technocrat. And I will just say to Mr. Stark, although we're going to be bringing you back in because you're quite important, we'll talk about you a lot over the coming months, Mr. Stark, but I will just say for now, what happens in Edinburgh stays in Edinburgh, doesn't it, Mr. Stark? Or I'm sure you will certainly help. I hope so anyway. So that's the central command and control function. The whole thing's being ushered in by these clowns. So these are the ones doing the dirty work down in the trenches. So you've got from the left, Andy Burnham, Mayor of Greater Manchester, Steve Rotherham, Mayor of the Liverpool City region, Mehdi Koban, Deputy Mayor for Energy and the Environment in London, Sadiq Khan's best mate, founder of My Life, My Say, an Obama leader, basically a Rothschild puppet. And these three are being babysat there by Auntie, you can see, which is Emma Howard Boyd, CBE, who's also wearing a dandelion badge. And we've spoken about dandelions a lot previously. And she is pulling the strings there with those three. The Metro mayors are there doing what they're told by the dandelions. And that just gives us a sense of how this whole thing's being orchestrated. And also a sense of, I think, how we can push back against it. Because as Simon Steele, the top guy for climate change at the UN, told us the other day, local governments are absolutely crucial in driving climate action. If it doesn't happen at a local level, it doesn't happen anywhere. So this is where the fight is to put a stop to this whole thing.
Okay, Ben, thank you very much. We're going to continue in a forthcoming news editions to dig into this morass of policymakers because we have to get the lid off it to stop it. Diane, where does that take us with yourself?
I just wanted to cover something that will be coming in much greater detail. As we know, countries around the world, unfortunately, have been doing their inquiries, which we know are essentially cover-ups, and I'm working on some deeper research on that. So I just wanted to say I got in touch, or actually she got in touch with me, this lady called Linda Wharton, who is in charge of the Health Forum New Zealand. And what she's got for us is basically she's responding to phase 2 of the inquiry in New Zealand. We all know about single source of truth, Jacinda Ardern, who was in charge at the time, and what she did to the people of New Zealand was very, very disturbing. So phase 2 of the inquiry, you could read the details there. There's quite a bit, but the part that I wanted you to see was that the way they worded it was quite, I thought, rather insulting. They said phase 2 is focusing on the topics anti-mandate groups got most hung up on, such as vaccines, lockdowns, and mandates. So she took that for real, and her group, which has all been about supporting the vaccine injured and so on in New Zealand, she decided to go ahead and take care of that. So this is her website, the Health Forum New Zealand, supporting COVID vaccine impacted. They call it vaccine impacted in New Zealand, New Zealanders. And here's a quote from her. This was an email that she sent to me a few days ago because she worked really hard to meet the deadline for getting submissions from the public. And as for the final deadline, as of on Friday, there had only been 7,300 submissions after 48 hours of manic posting, emailing, Facebook Lives, and 16-hour days. We finished with 31,000 submissions. Certainly not what the commissioners had been expecting, but we are all overwhelmed and delighted. The Health Forum submission was huge and in several different parts. I'm sending you just a few of the documents we wrote to serve as an overview to the Health Forum and the New Zealand COVID experience. And just to show a couple of photos that she sent me, I'm still looking through the documents that she sent me, but she told me I was free to share what she had sent to me. So here's a photo of different vaccine-injured people telling their stories, saying, please, no more mandates. The focus of their submission was about employment mandates, because in New Zealand, you weren't allowed to work if you didn't get vaccinated. So here's a lady who said, I refuse to be a trial subject. My body, my choice. 18 years caregiver. Vaccine took my friend, almost took my partner. Now it has taken my livelihood. 11 years a midwife, said somebody else. Advocating informed decisions, where's ours? Coercion is not a choice. So there's a huge submission of all these people. There's a joint submission. And as I said, over 30,000 submissions, and getting all that together in just a few days. I really hope that the New Zealand government will be overwhelmed by this incredible evidence that they've submitted. But again, as we've been saying throughout the news, Brian, it's another great example of people actually getting out there and doing something to let their voices be heard and let the governments be taken to account to what they've done to us.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's outstanding to see people getting out and tackling what's happening. We have to understand what is being done, how we're being attacked, especially the attacks on our minds. And then we have to get out there and challenge it at every level, whether that's a political level or whether it's simply getting in at the ground on some of those local authority meetings, parish council meetings, in order to challenge people pushing the policy through. Well, let's just end on this. I'll do this very quickly. We'll cover it in more detail on another day's news. But essentially, I've been pushing this interview, which will come out fairly shortly, but a really extraordinary interview with a person down in Cornwall talking about the destruction of the church, the Christian church, who is doing the destruction of the Church of England itself. But luckily, Christians in Cornwall now starting to speak out. But if you want to know what's coming, well, this is back to 2023, Private Members Bill, disestablishment of the Church of England. And this we can see really what's planned. Now, this seems to be stagnant at the moment, but it reflects the mindset of people that want to completely emasculate the Church of England. Here's the bill printed on the 6th of December 2023, and I'll just put in a little bit of the text here on screen. You can obviously freeze that. But the purpose of this act is to secure that the Church of England is disestablished and all the powers over faith, doctrine, liturgy, property, discipline and appointments now exercised over or on behalf of that church by the Crown, Parliament or private patrons are transferred in their entirety to the General Synod of the Church of England to be exercised in accordance with any rules determined by that body. Why this has become so significant for me is that the Christians in Cornwall are talking about the Church of England itself, its governing bodies, destroying churches in Cornwall and other locations in UK. It says the committee must be established. Let's just bring that on. And the committee must make recommendations to identify the legislative changes required to disestablish the Church of England, including ensuring the sovereign no longer holds the title of Defender of the Faith and Supreme Governor of the Church of England. Now, I'm going to stop there. But we will look at this in more detail. It's very clear that there is a major attack on the Church of England, the Christian church going on in this country. And of course, it's coming from the highest levels of our political system. Why do they need to do this? This follows the Marxist ideology, which has been a theme of today's news, that you must destroy people's ability to have a connection with a loving God. So I think today's news, very, very important on this bank holiday. What can you do about it? Challenge it at every opportunity in the simplest way, any way you can, and do it by joining up with other people, because we're all stronger if we work together. We must end there. Diane, thank you very much for joining me in the studio. Ben, thank you for coming in from studio number 2. And a huge thank you to all the audience that have joined us today for UK Column News. If you're a member of UK Column, we'll be back in a few minutes for UK Column Extra. Join us then. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.